All right, Alexander, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the Sussmann trial and what's going on there in the United States. We're kind of shifting gears, but from our coverage of Ukraine and Russia. But to be quite honest, when you look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, it's really just a continuation of not only the Obama EU coup d'état in 2014, but it's also a continuation of Russiagate and Ukrainegate and everything that happened during the 2016 election and beyond. So it's all connected, isn't it? But we have Sussmann now, the Clinton lawyer, and the big news last week, I think, was Robbie Mook's testimony. That was pretty big. But what's the latest going on from this trial?
Robbie Mook's testimony is sensational. It wasn't just big; it is sensational because actually, in a sense, it doesn't directly involve Sussmann. I mean, this is like so many of these cases that Durham has brought up to now. They're very much on the periphery. I mean, what Sussmann is being charged with is lying to the FBI, pretending that he was coming along to the FBI to report the Alpha Bank story. The Alpha Bank story was that story about, a private server in the basement of a bank somewhere that was being used supposedly by the Trump campaign to communicate with the Kremlin, and we now know that was all completely concocted and put together, and it was put together by all kinds of tech oligarchs and people in the US and their acolytes and all that kind of thing, and that Sussmann himself lied about the fact, that's what Duran alleges, that Sussmann lied about the fact that he was actually representing the Hillary Clinton campaign. He pretended to the FBI that he was coming forward as this concerned citizen after learning about this shocking revelation. Now, I'm going to say briefly on Sussmann himself, he's coming up with one of the most preposterous defenses I have ever seen. I mean, it is so ludicrous that I'm struggling to get my head round it. But to the extent that I can understand it, he accepts that he was, the attorney of Hillary Clinton's campaign. He accepts that he was part of the legal team that was billing the Hillary Clinton campaign. He accepts that, the hours that he put in his meetings with the FBI to promote this Alpha Bank story were part of the things that they billed the the Clinton campaign for. But he nonetheless says that he was telling the truth when he spoke to the FBI because the Hillary Clinton campaign wasn't really trying to get the FBI interested in this story. They were trying to get the media interested in this story. So when he was acting, he was going against the Hillary Clinton strategy. He was in effect, because he was going against the strategy, he wasn't their lawyer, and that's why he told the FBI the truth. Now, this is such a ridiculous defense. It is so nonsensical that I have to say, if I was Durham, I'd be worried, because when a defendant comes up with a defense that is so absurd, I would ask myself, is there something going on behind the scenes that I'm not really aware of? Bear in mind that this is an Obama-appointed judge. Just saying. I know. Anyway, let's put all that to one side, because Sussmann, though he's important, he's very close to Mark Elias and all that. This case is, as I said, on the absolute edge of the periphery of this thing. The real revelation comes from Robbie Mook. Robbie Mook confirms Hillary Clinton directly involved. She was the person who actually authorized the spread of the information about this Alpha Bank story. She actually took the decision. So this is the first indicator that we have. This is before the FBI opens its collusion investigation, Crossfire Hurricane. This is before all of that. This is the first indication that we have that Hillary Clinton is directly implicated in constructing this whole fable of a collusion between Donald Trump, his campaign, and the Russians. Now, Hillary Clinton's always been able to avoid being directly implicated up to now. This is her own campaign manager, and he's put her squarely in the frame. So I think this is really, really big news. Very big news. Now, bear in mind that this happened at the same time, roughly the same time, that the CIA Chief Brennan was briefing Obama that Hillary Clinton was intending to create a collusion allegation to discredit Trump. And, so the CIA were getting this information. The FBI, presumably, were also getting this information. But the point is, it's Hillary Clinton herself. And I think this is big. Now, it's still only one thread in this particular story. I think we're starting to work towards a position where we can see that Hillary Clinton was heavily involved in constructing the collusion part of Russiagate. And I think that we're also on the edges now, with all these tech executives floating around, going to sooner or later get to a point where there's an admission that the original story, the thing that really got people excited about Russiagate, the so-called Russian hack of the DNC, which led to all those emails being extracted and passed on to WikiLeaks, we're going to probably see that starting to be challenged before very long. I don't think we're very far from that point. But we now see Hillary Clinton herself is in the frame, if you like, and I'm sure at the moment she is starting to brief to get advice from lawyers. She's starting to speak to lawyers. We also see Perkins Coie, Sussmann's law firm. They're coming under increasing pressure, and of course that leads ultimately to Mark Elias as well.
Right. Okay. And all of this is perfectly timed, it seems, for the midterms. But I've only got one question. It's kind of a two-parter, and then you can take your time to answer it. And my first observation is, as I'm listening to you, I can't believe we're about to go to World War III, or we're so close to World War III for these clowns. So, question, first part of the question is, what do you think Hillary Clinton and her team really wanted to do with this Russia controls Trump is connected to Russia narrative? Because I can understand what they were trying to do pre-2016 election. Okay, you want to subvert the Trump campaign because you want to win the election. But what were they trying to accomplish by continuing to peddle this stuff after Trump had already won? And the second part to my question is, in this video open, I said that all of this stuff that happened with regards to Clinton and Alpha Bank and Trump Russia has led us to where we are today. Can you expand on that? Is it true that this Trump Russia lie has played a role in taking us very, very close to a World War III, Russia, NATO, Russia, US conflict? Many people would argue, myself included, that we already have a Russia, NATO proxy war taking place right now. So is it a stretch to say that everything that happened pre-2016, but I would say even after 2016, has played a significant role in this conflict in Ukraine? Expand on that, Alexander. Assange, what's going on with Assange is also part of Hillary Clinton's lies. And very quickly, I say this because I did a video this morning and I talked about how Morgan Freeman has been banned from ever entering Russia again, the actor Morgan Freeman. And the reason the Russians banned him is because of what he said in 2017, 2018 with regards to Russiagate. He was peddling, according to Moscow, he was peddling the Russiagate lies. He was parroting those lies. And I thought to myself, God, the Russians have not let this go.
No.
To ban Morgan Freeman permanently. It shows that the Russians remember. Russiagate, and it affected them. Anyway, take your time to answer it and,
No,
and put the pieces
absolutely.
together, because I think it's an important, we talk about the coup in 2014, but what happened with Russiagate, I think, is important to understand with regards to the conflict today.
I think it is absolutely essential to understand. First of all, always remember that the people who were involved in the Clinton campaign, who made all the important decisions involving Russiagate, many of them are part of the Biden administration. Jake Sullivan is directly implicated in this Alpha Bank story. I mean, as it implicated, I'm not suggesting so far that there's been any criminal case brought against him, but he was one of the people who was going around spreading the Alpha Bank story, the one that Mike Sussmann is being prosecuted for, which is completely discredited, by the way. It's now universally accepted that that was created out of the minds, the imaginations of American tech oligarchs. Anyway, Jake Sullivan was involved in spreading that story. He is now Biden's national security advisor. He's one of the big hawks in one of these people who's been pushing, propagating this conflict. Now, that's just Jake Sullivan. All of the others are also involved. Now, what were the Clintons? Why did they persist with Russiagate after it had failed to serve its purpose? It had failed in preventing Donald Trump from being elected. Why did they proceed with it? Well, I don't think we have a full answer yet, but I think two things. There's two obvious explanations, and there may be more, but I think there's two very obvious explanations. The first is that they were afraid that the way in which they had created Russiagate during the campaign in order to discredit Donald Trump might itself be investigated, and that might lead to investigations of them. One of the most interesting things that has come out over the course of the Sussmann case is, do you remember back in March 2017, Donald Trump published that tweet in which he said that he'd been wiretapped, and everybody ridiculed it, and it was laughed at, and people said that that wasn't true. We now know that the FBI, we know this from, the Sussmann case, the documents that have been coming out through discovery in the discovery process in the Sussmann case. We know that the FBI were horrified by that tweet and were running around desperately trying to find out how Donald Trump had got that information. So even as they were denying that it was happening, they were scared that the President of the United States was appeared to know more about the way they were monitoring and surveilling him than they thought that he knew. So, I mean, that already tells you that these people had were feeling very insecure and nervous about their positions at the time when, after Trump's win, after he became president, they were terrified that he would order investigations, that he would find out what they'd really been up to, that their careers might be threatened, that perhaps it might lead all the way to Hillary Clinton herself, and it would show the connections of these various people to Hillary Clinton. That is one reason. But I think that there is a deeper reason, a much deeper reason, and that is my own personal view. Now, people will probably not agree with this, but I think that Hillary Clinton was positioning herself to take over as President of the United States in 2016 as the Queen of the Neocons. I can remember that there was a whole team of people from the State Department issuing statements at the time saying that the United States needed to take a much stronger line on various things. Clearly it was about Syria. Clearly it was about Russia in Syria. I think there was also an agenda at that time to do something about Ukraine. I think there were all kinds of plans to basically hit at Russia, because that was what the neocons were wanting to do. And I think that the intention was to used Russiagate during the campaign, the collusion story, both to prevent Donald Trump from being elected and also to make the American people angry with Russia in order to set the scene for this confrontation with Russia, first in Syria and then in Ukraine. And the first part, stopping Donald Trump from getting elected, failed, but the other part of it, the plan to destroy Russia's reputation, to destroy US-Russian relations in order to prepare the grounds for a confrontation with Russia, that continued, and it got even greater urgency and even greater anger because, of course, there was this president who was elected, Donald Trump, who, far from being signed up to a policy of confrontation with Russia, on the contrary, wanted to improve relations with Russia. So you can see why Russiagate went up into ever higher gears and why the hysteria actually built up. Partly it was, as I said, people trying to protect themselves from discovery about what they've been doing, but secondly, it would have been part of a long-standing, well-prepared plan for confronting Russia, and the people who were pushing it, including Hillary Clinton, were not giving up on it simply because the election in 2016 had not gone their way. That is my own view. Now, if that is correct, you're absolutely right in your original comments. I think these two events, Russiagate and the conflict in Ukraine, are utterly interconnected. The reason they are interconnected in the way they are is because this agenda of starting some kind of conflict in Ukraine has been there from the outset, and Russiagate was part of the psychological preparation to work up the American people, and indeed, to some extent, people in Europe, to prepare them for this confrontation that we have now.
Right. I wonder if the 4 years of Trump, real quick, gave Russia 4 extra years to prepare for this eventual confrontation. And likewise, it also gave 4 years to NATO so that they could prepare Ukraine as well. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Trump presidency gave both sides time to prepare for each other. And
Yes.
not Russia, Ukraine, but also Russia, NATO. I mean,
Yes.
that was like a 4-year preparation.
I am entirely of the view in both cases. I mean, you mentioned about the fact that the Russians have now sanctioned somebody who propagate the Russiagate myths. I think the Russians probably way back in 2016 understood what was going on and started to work extremely hard to prepare for the day of that confrontation in Ukraine, which was to come. And we've seen that they succeeded to a great extent on the economic front, and we've seen also what steps they're taking on the military front. But it's also simultaneously the case that obviously Ukraine has been very, very heavily rearmed over the intervening years. And on top of that, we've also seen a systematic attempt to use Russiagate to purge both the United States and Europe and the information space of any dissident voices that might have otherwise opposed this rush to confrontation. Now, I'm going to throw in a view of my own, which is perhaps one which is not directly related to this question, but I think is, and which gives us some idea of why I take all of these views and of how carefully prepared, in my opinion, this was. Now, one of the mysteries about the US pullout from Afghanistan last year is why a administration so heavily staffed with neocons did it. I am now come to the view that the reason the Biden administration pulled US troops out of Afghanistan was because it wanted to get the US military out of Afghanistan so that in the event when the confrontation with Russia in Ukraine came, those troops in Afghanistan might not be the target of retaliatory action by the Russians. In other words, it was a tidying up exercise before this big event in Ukraine, which we're seeing now. And I think that explains Afghanistan, which has never really made a huge amount of sense to me. But I think that is what has happened. So this both sides prepared. They prepared very carefully. We will find out over the next few months who prepared better and where all this is going. But the two things have been interconnected, and they've been there from the start. The neocons have been out to get Putin and Russia, at least since the 2007 Munich Security Conference speech. The Russians have been taking their own preparatory steps. This was the confrontation which was coming. I want to just finish lastly with one further point. We're only at the very, very edge of the Russiagate story. There's so much more. We still haven't heard anything at all, for example, about that very strange business of George Papadopoulos and Joseph Mifsud. And in some ways, I still think that is the real key to this whole affair, because, as has been pointed out, the Mifsud-Papadopoulos affair started before everything else, and we still don't know who Mifsud is or what's become of him. So once we get to the bottom of that, and we'll see whether Durham is even interested in that aspect of it, that's when I will start to feel personally that we're finally getting to the real root of what was going on with Russiagate.
Yeah, Trump stood in the way of their plans, but I wish Trump would have stood up to the neocons a little bit better instead of trusting in the neocons so much, like Bolton and Mitch McConnell and these guys, because Trump wanted to make peace with Russia. It was obvious. He said it many times, and he just couldn't. He couldn't get to the point where he could just tell McConnell and Lindsey Graham and all of these guys and the Boltons who are in his staff to just buzz off. I'm going to do this. You know, things would have been much different if he had accomplished that.
Things would have been completely different, and we wouldn't be in this crisis that we're in, which is getting worse every day. And we've had some very alarming comments from the President of the United States about Taiwan now, which we're going to cover elsewhere. I mean, it just goes to show how dangerous this administration is. And the reason we have this incredibly dangerous administration, the roots of it, go all the way back to 2016 and to what happened at the start of Russiagate.
All right. Russiagate. What a disaster for the United States of America.
Absolutely.
What Hillary Clinton unleashed on the U.S. Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. TheDuran.locals.com, everybody, and the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.